These two watches do exactly the same thing. Press the top button. A hand starts sweeping around the dial. Press it again, the hand stops. Press the bottom button, it snaps back to 0. It's a stopwatch living on your wrist. That's what a chronograph is. One of these costs $300. The other costs $30,000. 100 times more for the same 3 tricks. And here's the wild part. You can feel the difference between them with a single press of your thumb before you ever see the price tag. Most people think the expensive one is better because it has something called a column wheel, and the cheap one's hand jumps because it has something called a cam. And that is wrong, twice over. By the end of this, you'll know why. You'll be able to feel exactly what you're paying for, and you'll never look at a chronograph the same way again. Because this is the third in a little series. We've learned to see quality in a watch dial and in a case. Now we're going to feel it in the click of a button. And the secret is this. A chronograph doesn't make one decision. It makes 2. And almost everyone, including the internet, mixes them up. So, 3 questions. 1. If they do the identical job, where does 100 times price gap even come from? 2. Why does the cheaper one's hand jump when it starts? And is that really the cam's fault? And 3. Is the fancy column wheel actually better or just fancier? There's one customer whose answer settles it. NASA. The principle. A stopwatch needs 2 things. Let's build this from 0. A normal watch just tells the time. Quietly, continuously, never stopping. A chronograph adds a stopwatch on top. A second hand you can start, stop, and reset whenever you like, without disturbing the actual time. And that's much harder than it sounds. Because to run that stopwatch, you have to borrow power from a watch that's already running. Grab it on demand, then cleanly give it back, all without stopping the watch itself. To pull that off, a chronograph has to solve 2 completely separate problems. And this is the idea that unlocks the whole video, so stay with me. Problem 1, the switch. One press of a button has to coordinate 3 different actions in the right order. Start, stop, reset. Something has to be the control panel that routes all that. That's the job of the column wheel or the cam. Problem 2, the clutch. You've got a watch spinning away and a stopwatch hand sitting still. How do you connect the 2 smoothly on demand without jamming the watch? That's a different part entirely. The clutch, vertical or horizontal. Here's the way to hold it in your head. Think of a car. The switch is the gear stick, how you command the machine. A slick gear stick or a notchy one, that's about feel. The clutch is the actual clutch pedal, how the engine connects to the wheels. A smooth clutch pulls away without a lurch. A rough one makes the car buck. And crucially, you can have a lovely gear stick on a car that lurches, or a silky clutch with a vague gear stick. They're 2 separate things. It's exactly the same inside a chronograph. The switch is the feel. The clutch is the behavior. So when someone says column wheel versus cam, as if it's the one thing that matters, they're only talking about the gear stick and forgetting the clutch entirely. 2 decisions, not 1, and these weren't luxuries. That little heart-shaped part that snaps the stopwatch hand back to 0. Patented by Adolphe Nicole in 1844, it's what made a working chronograph possible in the first place. The column wheel came along around 1890. And then, from the 1940s, the cam arrived for one blunt reason. It was cheaper and easier to build and repair. The cam wasn't a failure or a compromise. It was the part that took the chronograph off the aristocrat's desk and put it on an ordinary wrist. So, 2 decisions. The switch, which you feel, the clutch, which you see. Let's start with your thumb. The switch, part 1, the column wheel. Meet the column wheel. It's a tiny wheel shaped like a castle turret, or a chess rook with little pillars standing up around it. Every time you press the pusher, it rotates by 1 notch, and around it sit little levers, like fingers, that either drop down between the pillars or ride up on top of them. Depending on where those fingers land, the chronograph starts, stops, or resets. It's a rotary control tower. And because the geometry is so precise, the fingers dropping cleanly into the gaps, the button feels a very particular way. Light, crisp, clean. A defined two-stage click, like a beautifully made switch snapping between positions. This is the pusher feel that collectors write love letters about. You press it once and you understand the fuss. But there's a catch, and it's the whole reason for the price. A column wheel is fiddly, lots of tiny, precise parts, all of which have to be made accurately and then adjusted by a skilled human by hand. That labor, hours of it, is a big slice of why the expensive chronograph is expensive. So, if the column wheel is so lovely, why doesn't every chronograph have one? Because in the middle of the last century, someone asked a very practical question. What if we made this cheaper? The switch, part 2, the cam. The answer was the cam. Instead of a turret, you use a set of flat-shaped pieces of metal, cams, and levers. Press the pusher, and it turns a cam, whose curved edge shoves the levers between positions to do the same 3 jobs. Start, stop, reset, same functions. Completely different guts. And it feels different under your thumb. Turning that cam takes more force, and the levers have to climb little ramps against spring tension. So the button is firmer, heavier, a bit spongier, the transition less sharply defined. Now, is that worse? Not necessarily. Plenty of people honestly prefer the meatier, more mechanical clunk of a good cam. It feels like operating a tool. It's a taste, not a fault. And the cam's real win is everything you can't feel. It's far simpler, cheaper, tougher, and easier to service. Just springs and levers that any workshop can make and mend. This is the system that put a reliable stopwatch on millions of ordinary wrists. Now at this point, someone in the comments is already typing, but the cam is why the cheap one's hand jumps when you start it. Hold that thought. Because that is the single most repeated mistake about chronographs. And I'm about to show you the real culprit. It's not the cam at all. The clutch. The real story of the jump. Remember, the switch is only half the machine. We've sorted the button. The thing your thumb feels. Now, for the thing your eyes see. How the stopwatch hand behaves. And that's a totally different part. The clutch. Here's the problem the clutch solves. The watch's gears are always spinning. To time something, you have to connect the still stopwatch hand to that spinning machine, on demand. The classic way is a horizontal clutch, a gear that swings in sideways to mesh with the running gear, like sliding one cog into another. And here's the thing everyone gets wrong. When 2 gears try to mesh from a standstill, their teeth don't always meet perfectly. Sometimes they clash, tooth on tooth, before they slot together. And when that happens, the stopwatch hand gives a tiny twitch, a little jump forward, right as you start it. That's the jump. And it is caused by the horizontal clutch, not the cam, not the switch, the clutch. This matters because it means the 2 things people always bundle together are actually independent. A column wheel driving a horizontal clutch can still jump. The cam never touches the hand's behavior. It only changes how the button feels. Everyone blames the cheap cam for the jumpy hand. The cam is innocent. It was the clutch all along. So how do the best chronographs kill the jump? They stack the clutch a different way, vertically. Picture 2 friction plates, like a tiny motorbike clutch, pressing together face to face. The gears are always meshed. Nothing has to slide in and clash. To start timing, you just clamp the plates together and the hand glides off from a dead stop with no jump at all. Glassy smooth. As a bonus, because nothing engages and disengages with teeth, there's less wear. So you can even leave the stopwatch running all the time without hurting it. The price? A vertical clutch has more parts, it's thicker, and it's harder to make and service. And here's the subtlety that ties the whole video together. In luxury movements, the vertical clutch is usually paired with a column wheel. That's why people assume column wheel equals smooth hand. But it was never the column wheel doing that. It was the clutch sitting next to it. The two just tend to travel together, like a leather interior and a big engine, related by price bracket, not by cause. So now you can read any chronograph like a mechanic. The buttons feel? That's the switch. A column wheel for a crisp, light click, a cam for a firmer one. The hand's behavior. That's the clutch. Vertical for a glassy start, horizontal for a little jump. Two decisions, not one. And the price gap? It's mostly about how hard those two parts are to make and to mend. The myth and NASA. So here's the big question. The column wheel is smoother to press, prettier to look at, and more prestigious. Does that make it better? There's one customer whose opinion cuts through all the romance. NASA. When NASA needed a chronograph tough enough to certify for spaceflight, they qualified the Omega Speedmaster in 1965. And yes, that early moonwatch ran a column wheel, the caliber 321. But then, in 1968, Omega switched the Speedmaster to a cam-actuated movement, the caliber 861, and today its descendant, the 3861, which means the watch on the wrist of every astronaut who walked on the moon after that point, the most famous tool watch in history, is running the cheap system, the cam. And it's not alone. The most produced chronograph movement in the entire history of watchmaking is the Valjoux 7750 from 1973. Cam-actuated, horizontal clutch. It powers watches from Tag Heuer, Breitling, IWC, SIN, and it runs reliably for decades with simple servicing. It was one of the first movements ever designed with computer-aided design. And here's the kicker for the snobs. Early versions used a few plastic parts to keep costs down. Purists were horrified. The watches ran flawlessly. The honest trade-off. So let's be honest, in both directions. The column wheel is genuinely gorgeous. Lovely to watch through a sapphire case back, lovely to press, steeped in history. But it's harder to make, costlier to service, and if it's vintage, spare parts can be scarce. The cam feels firmer and wins no beauty contests, but it's cheap, tough, serviceable almost anywhere, and nearly bulletproof. Neither is better. They're tuned for different things. The reputation gap between them is far bigger than the performance gap. So, what is that 10 times actually buying? Hand finishing and hours of skilled assembly. The labor of a column wheel and a vertical clutch. Decoration, rare materials, the brand on the dial, and low production numbers. What it is not buying is a better stopwatch. Both of them time your parking meter exactly as well. Connection and future. And this splits open a lesson way bigger than watches. The switch versus transmission divide is everywhere once you see it. It's your car, gear stick versus clutch. It's your bike, the shifter versus the derailleur. It's even a power drill, the trigger versus the clutch collar. One part is how you command the machine, another is how the power actually connects. Two decisions in almost every machine you touch. And the deepest point is the same one from the watch case film. Premium feel and actual performance are two different things, and marketing absolutely loves to blur them. A crisper click is a real lovely thing. It is not the same as a better watch. Knowing the difference is what stops you paying thousands for the wrong reason. The good news is the gap is closing. Vertical clutches and column wheels are turning up at lower and lower prices as manufacturing improves. So brands increasingly sell you the feel, precisely because the function is so evenly matched now. Meanwhile, that humble 7750 rolls on, 50 years and counting. Proof, like the $12 Casio from an earlier film, that good enough, tough and fixable is its own kind of genius. So, back to our two chronographs. Press the expensive one. Feel that light, Crisp click. Column wheel. Watch the hand sweep off dead smooth from 0. Vertical clutch. Now the $300 one, feel the firmer click, that tiny jump as the hand starts. Cam. And a horizontal clutch. Same 3 tricks. 100 times the price. And now you know. You're paying for feel and finish and hours of human hands, not for a better stopwatch. The one that went to the moon proved that. And notice, we kept saying the chronograph has to borrow power from the watch. Borrow too much, and the whole watch loses accuracy, which is why the hardest chronographs of all fight to time down to 100th of a second, spinning their balance at blistering speed. But that's a story for another day. So next time you're in a shop, pick up a chronograph and press it. And this time feel the switch and watch the clutch separately. Tell me in the comments what you felt and whether you're Team Crisp Column Wheel or Team Meaty Cam. And tell me which story you want next. The watch that times to 100th of a second, or the invisible force that can stop a mechanical watch dead. Magnetism. If this was worth your time, the subscribe button costs nothing and genuinely helps. There's a card on screen for how you learn to read a watch case, the last film in this Feel the Quality series. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.